Okay, hey, welcome to another episode of The Influential Nonprofit with your host, I'm Marianne. You know me. I work with nonprofit leaders to master the art of influence so they can raise more money. And I'm here with my new friend, Stephen Newland, because we are going to talk about money today. Money, 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 and specifically money mindset because, and this is something I've said a lot, but I have not really talked about, I don't think on this podcast, how we think and feel about money directly relates to how much money we have, how much money we'll save, and how much money we'll raise, right? And there's a lot of bad feelings around money, right? Money doesn't grow on trees. Money is the root of all evil. And also, Stephen, I would love to talk about like there is a resentment of wealth. And so if you are going to be asking wealthy people for money, and if there's an underlying resentment that they have money and maybe you don't, that can come across. And I think money mindset and how we think and feel about money, both from the fundraising perspective and just running a nonprofit, is I think it's something that people don't talk about that really affects all of us. So I'm excited to have this conversation. Welcome to this podcast, Stephen.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here today. I love talking about money. So, especially the kind of softer side of money, the mindset
The
side of it.
mindset of
So,
money, right?
yeah.
Um, okay, so before we get into this, you have 15 years of experience in finance. We were just chatting. You're spanning nonprofits, startups, Fortune 500 companies. You've worked for it all, and for the last 6 to 8 months or so, you're really doing fractional CFO work for nonprofits because you saw that they weren't really getting the attention, like the focused attention, and I think the credibility that others. So I'm happy you're doing that. Now I'm excited to get into this, but before we do, I always start with the same question, which is, tell me something you're proud of that you don't get to brag about a lot.
Ooh. Um, okay. So, all right, we'll do it. We'll do it money related. I had a couple in mind, but I'm gonna go money related because it'll I think it'll set this episode up well. Coming out of school, so I graduated with finance and a finance and accounting degree. I thought I knew everything about money. I thought I was a genius. I came out of school with about $55,000 of debt, and I put a plan together. And almost to the day, I said I'm going to pay this off in 4 years. I remember sitting in my college house, and I said, I'm going to pay this off in 4 years. Almost to the month, I paid off that debt in 4 years, and so I try to share that because a lot of people kind of struggle with debt in silence, and so anyway, that's something I'm really proud of.
Yeah, that is amazing that you set it out and you accomplished it. And also, like I heard this once, life is a toll road. Incurring debt is an investment, and this is like an
Right.
investment in your education, right? And so I think there is a stigma around debt as bad
Mhm.
when actually sometimes you like I just remember I was at this retreat and this guy said, well, life is a toll road. Some I mean, people get business loans and things like that to actually do what they want, with of course the plan to pay it back. So I love that. Okay. So what we want to talk about today, I want to start off strong, is I think one of the biggest things, a pervasive belief system through a nonprofit that we've been taught, which I think is contingent or based on sort of the capitalistic nature, of, okay, let me back up for a second. I want to frame this a little bit because nonprofit does not make a profit. But we're functioning in a capitalist structured society, right? Which values profit. And because of that, I generally think we have a scarcity mindset in general, but I think nonprofits specifically get it hard. And I've even said this because I believed it to be true. I worked for a firm, we did marketing and branding, and we would say, well, you got to get your share because, there's only so much money for philanthropy, which is really a lie. It's a lot. And I believe that there's enough money, there's enough time, there's enough everything. But I do feel like the myth of scarcity has really strangled nonprofits as far as the ability to invest in growth, the ability to um, really be big, bold moves. Because they feel like, oh, there's never going to be enough, or where's it going to come from, and da da da. So I'd love to hear from your like financial perspective what you see in the industry.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, if you just take the name, not for profit, right there alone, it's kind of baked in. Like It's almost like creating a little bit of a I can't profit off of the work I'm doing, and so it creates a little bit of a scarcity mindset, I think, right out of the gate.
Yeah,
Um,
right. Well, I say like we're defined by what we aren't as a not. So we're defined by a negative, which I do think like impacts the collective
yes,
self-esteem of the sector. Like, who cares if
that's
we make a
great.
profit or not? That's not that important. But because of the society that's like, hey, your
Yeah,
businesses make profits and you don't, you became a nonprofit instead of, a community-based business or a social business or you know what I mean, or whatever else we
yeah.
want to call it.
Well, and one of the kind of the stigmas around it, or kind of I guess misunderstandings around it, is what does not for profit actually mean? And essentially what it means is in a for-profit business, there are owners, there's ownership in place, and those owners can personally profit from the activities of that organization. Meaning if they bring in more sales, they can go sell their business, down the line. They can profit from that. In a nonprofit, there is, no one personally can sell that entity. It is not a personally owned entity, and so no one can go make a profit off of that. But at the bottom line, you can still, bring more in every year than you make. You can build a financially sustainable organization, and in fact, that's a really healthy thing to do. But there can be a little bit of a misconception around that.
Right. So you can make a profit. You just roll those profits back into the organization.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. A couple of years, this was a few years ago. This was like the spring of 2020, right? Pre-pandemic. I was
Mm.
doing a workshop in Chicago around money mindset and fundraising. And this woman told this story. And I really loved this story. And she said she was a board member and her executive director, and she was president of the board and they were constantly like at odds over money. And she was a saver, and she's like, I want to save, I want to, right? And he was a break even kind of guy, and we're gonna figure it out. And the second I asked this question, and she looked at me, and I said, "Tell me about your childhood."
Mhm.
And she went like this, and this was her childhood. I was raised by a single mother, and
Yep.
we struggled mightily. And she was all about saving and investing and saving. And I am a saver and investor. And this guy was kind of like kind of a free and easy, and he pulled it off, right? Like he broke even, but and I would say, it's basically like two 7-year-olds are arguing because you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because she's coming from this belief of the because our money, the way we think and feel about money was formed in childhood. That's why I
Yep.
asked her, like, well, what was your childhood like? And she looks at me like, why are you asking me that? I'm like, just tell me about it. And like, oh, and so it's like that belief, like, and then this person had a completely different relationship with money, and now that's what they're fighting about. They're not right. They're fighting about these internal or these beliefs that were ingrained in them probably from youth instead of what was actually happening.
Yep.
And I think that's the biggest thing is how we think and feel about money is probably comes from our childhood.
I could not agree more. When I mentioned this before we started, but I had done financial counseling and coaching before, and I have sat probably across from I don't know maybe 150 or 200 people, for an hour, and we just went through their budget and talked about money. Before I even dove into numbers, one of the first things I always asked was, how was money talked about? How was money, like, what was your experience with money as a child? Or how did your parents, how did your parents handle money? And I can't tell you, it uncovered so many insights and almost to a T, every time a light bulb went off, like, oh yeah, my mom or my dad we just kind of always made it work, and we didn't worry about money, and that's why I just spend now because I know it'll come through. Something will come through. Or the exact opposite, where there was just always worry about money. Like for me, that there was always kind of a general like cloudiness, kind of a worry about money. Even in good times, and there's deeper psychological stuff I can get into with that, but that has carried over for me. And so there's a natural bend for me to want to be a saver, because what if something bad happens? What if,
Right.
and so the first way to disarm that is just to understand, um, like what is driving that feeling. So I love what you said. 2 7-year-olds, you are spot on.
Yeah.
But a lot of people haven't dug deep and like really
Right.
thought
And
about that. Right.
that's why I think this conversation is so important because,
Yeah.
for, if you're, when you're listening to this, to think about, yeah, what was my childhood? What was my money story? I was a later in life child. Okay, I'm 59. My mom was 40 when I was born. That was like incredibly old, back then. And but my parents, my mother's father owned a grocery store during Great Depression and World War II, which is actually a great thing to have. And my
Mhm.
my mom actually had means, but they never felt wealthy. And my mom, they always would feel like they never had enough or there was never enough. And my parents were like the typical, silent generation, like squirrel away everything. And everybody had this basement stock of canned goods,
Yep.
and my
Yep.
mom was very frugal. And I became very not frugal, and so my
Yeah.
mom was always like, because you never know what's going to happen. I'm like, right, you never know what's going to happen. So let's go have fun now. But what I realized is I was still in my mother's mindset. I was just acting in opposition of it,
Yes.
right? So I hadn't formed my own beliefs around money, and done that kind of work about that. And in fact, my husband would say, we have a daughter with a disability, and she's 18, so we're her guardians now. And my husband would say, it's just not enough. I just want to make sure we have enough. And I'm like, so how much is enough? Like,
Yeah.
how much is enough? Because you have this much, and then, but because it's a feeling, it's not a real thing, right? So
Right.
okay, if we had $500,000, would that be enough? If we had $1 million, would that be enough? And so we had to think about, okay, how much is enough? What would it take? Like, you know what I mean? Like, okay,
Yeah.
let's figure out what would it take. And then it turns out we had enough, and he could
Right.
leave that. But that was the story he was saying. Oh, we don't have enough. We don't have enough. And so I'm just really fascinated with how people perceive their relationship to money.
And
Um,
I
and
was
so
gonna,
I would love to hear more about, like, especially like from the nonprofit perspective, what
hmm.
you're seeing now with the clients that you work with in their relationship to money.
Yeah, I think, I mean, again, everyone, to your point, I mean, everyone's different. So it kind of, I've seen it, where, however their personal views on money, I've seen it come into the organization. And it's the same with small businesses and startups. I mean, I've seen it with just about everybody. So if you tend to be more of a penny pincher or saver, outside of, with your with your personal funds, you probably get more upset about why are we wasting so much money in the organization? We got to be really like tight on expenses, and we can't, we want to lock things down, or nervous to make investments into things that are going to help grow the organization. So I've seen that quite a bit. And if you are also someone who is has a little bit of a skittish relationship with money, I would say more so this is probably, I can speak to the saver because I'm more of a saver. um, it can be a little harder for us to ask for money. And at least that's been my experience. So, whereas someone who's a spender is maybe more okay with it. These are again generalizations, but that's been my personal experience with it. And so I've seen that also play into fundraising big time, where you
Yeah.
might ask for less than you might have put double that grant you applied for, or maybe you could have gone a little bit higher with that big funder, but you didn't want to, rock the boat.
Right, right. Like, I always call it the trifecta. It's like, money, which is a trigger, the vulnerability of asking for help, and the possibility of rejection. And those three
Mm,
things combined make that very powerful. And money is a trigger. And I love what you said about, like, you're helping people. And the first thing you said is, tell me about your money story, because
mm,
you can't really help people. You can say it seems so easy, like, oh, make a budget. But
right.
that's not everyone's ability to do that. And they're just going to shut down. It's
Yeah.
their fight or flight's going to activate, right? Because there's so much guilt and shame around money, and what, the meaning that we give it. And their fight or flight will shut down, and
Yeah.
or they'll shut down or run. And so I think it's so important to, like, that. I think it's so cool that you're like, hey, so tell me about your money, so that you can understand where they're coming from. Are they a spender? Are they a saver? Were they taught that, because there was, one of my first mentors in my business grew up very, very poor, and then wound up amassing a lot of wealth. And he said,
Mhm.
I kept making a bunch of money and spending it and making a bunch of money and spending it. And then I realized that my mother taught me that rich people are selfish.
Hmm.
And I had so much discomfort with all of this money. And like that's why people win the lottery and spend it in 2 years, because literally their
Yep.
subconscious is screaming like, get rid of it. This is
Yep.
not comfortable for us. I mean, I had a friend who won the lottery and she passed away and a couple of years ago. Look, just let me tell you, money doesn't make you happy. I can tell you that for sure.
Yep.
And the millions of dollars that they won, it made their life more comfortable, but not any more happy, you
Hmm.
know? And so I think I hear all the time, oh, if I won the lottery, and I'm like, okay, sure.
Yeah, the magic wand doesn't fix the underlying behaviors and the underlying emotions, right?
Yes. Like, so this is one of the things I work with people on all the time. Like, if I had this, then I'd feel better. But it's like,
Yep.
okay, let me feel better and then get this, right? Let
Yep.
me do that inner work and get this. And this is what I feel like we're just not doing enough of. And then one time a client said to me, he went to a very he was a smaller nonprofit and went to a much larger nonprofit's big benefit. And he's like, I just don't know people who can raise their hand and give $5,000. That's not my people. And I'm like, and that was his, like he felt like that was, oh, if he doesn't know people like that and that's not his world. And I'm
Mm,
like, but they're people too, like
right. Spot on.
even
Yeah.
rich people poop.
That's so good. That's so good. Well, and I've heard it framed like this, and it's been really helpful. Um, Donors, yeah, we'll just use like big donors. To me, they're the same as an investor in a business. An investor in a business wants a return on that money. They want a profit. They want to have more money at the end of the day because they gave you money. Um, a similar transaction is happening in nonprofits, but it's not a financial return. It's either a social return or a mission oriented return, or they can feel really good about that money that they've given, but they want to see impact as their return on investment. And there are people out there who want that, and who want that just as much as they want that profit return.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And I think sometimes we tend to acquiesce. Oh, you have the money, you have the power.
yeah.
And oh, I have to do what they say because they have the money, they have the power. And that's the scarcity mindset creeping in.
you you have something they want, right? They want impact. They want to
Right.
use their money for impact. They can't, they need to give that to someone who is directly impacting people or a cause or insert whatever your mission is. So you absolutely have something that they want too.
Right. And it's a mutually beneficial relationship.
Correct.
That's what
Yep.
relationships are. And
Yep.
I was doing this training once and this guy said that it was for Marines coming out of going back into civilian life. And this guy, he was saying how this really big funder said, "Oh, do you work with other branches of the military?" And he's like, "Or would you consider that?" And he said, "I didn't know what to say because this is a lot of money." And we've been spending the whole morning together. And I said, "Well, what do you think?" I think you would have said, and I would have said, and he said that we serve Marines and that it's a very different experience than the other branches, and we're just really not qualified. And I would
Mhm.
love to help anyone who needs it, and we know like what we do best. And I said, "And did you say that?" And he said, "Yeah." And what did he say? He goes, "Oh, okay." But this guy was literally gonna re
Right.
change the sole mission of the organization to get this big gift
Right.
because the guy basically was like, because it felt more like a command than a question. Like, oh, he'll fund us if we serve other people. But when he explained what they do, he's like, oh, okay. And also, he may say,
Yeah.
hey, you know what? I'm looking for organizations that serve all military branches. Like, hey, no problem.
Yeah.
And that's again the scarcity mindset. Like, oh, I'm going to change my mission so I can get this money because
Yeah.
I don't know where the next dollar is going to come from. So I better get this one and do whatever cartwheels and mental gymnastics I need to do to get that money.
Yep. And then that's how, you've seen, I've seen it happen. I'm sure you have too, where scope creep kind of happens within the nonprofit. And all of a sudden they find themselves with an extra program that they really maybe didn't fully fit or kind of drug them away from their core mission, just to take a large donation.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Yep. So you do fractional CFO work, and
Yeah.
the fractional, I didn't know what that word was for like 2 years ago, and now it's all around me all the time. I've had people on who are fractional fundraisers, fractional marketers, and so fractional finance. What do you see as from your perspective is some of the biggest, like kind of, I don't want to say mistakes, but let me
Yeah.
see if I can phrase this a little more positively. What would be the thing that the most common thing that nonprofits could do to better their relationship with money?
I think there is one that stands out, and I have seen it common far too often, and it's not having some sort of a forecast in place. And this is something that's just updated once a month. It could be once a month, could be once a quarter. Think of the budget is I think of it as a snapshot in time. We are putting our best guess on paper at the end of the year, maybe in the fall of the prior year, as to what we think the entire next year is going to look like. And then we typically don't touch it again until the next year. We might look at it, but a forecast is a living, breathing document. And it is just as things change in the organization, and we all know by February, okay, that one person left the organization that I didn't think was going to leave. Now we have to go. Are we gonna rehire them? Are we gonna, how are we gonna shuffle things around? Or that big donor came in and that you didn't budget. This forecast just helps you manage money in a shorter term basis, and I find this helps combat the scarcity mindset, and it also helps combat the kind of the freewheeling, just going to spend whatever and not pay attention to it. It helps kind of bring both of those mindsets back to center, because this is reality. This is what we have to operate in. So
Yeah,
I would say a forecast.
a forecast, and because both of those mindsets, like the it's it's kind of like I said, calming them. Right? Remember, I told you
Mhm.
that my husband would say, and he would say, "Well, we don't have enough. We don't." And I go, "How much is enough?" Well, let's figure out how much enough is, and then I guess that was forecasting. Maybe
Yeah,
that was what we
that's
were doing,
exactly that's
figuring
it.
out how much we
Yep.
needed.
Yep.
And
That's it.
also one of the other things is like I feel so grown up because we did our estate and our trust that we set up this trust and all this stuff, and
Yep.
I'm like, oh, look at me, I'm so grown up. That mostly it was because of my daughter. We have guardianship. She's 18. We have guardianship,
Mm,
and then and like who will care for her and all those things, and it brings up uncomfortable things that that I won't be around forever and stuff like that. But as we're going through this process and we got to figure out, okay, what is enough, and then making sure that she has that, and poof, I don't have to sit up
yeah.
all night and worry about that
Yep.
because I worry doesn't change it anyway.
That's exactly right. And the from a warrior's perspective, the here's where forecasting comes into play is you can scenario plan. It's just a sandbox of your finances. Like you can play around with it and say, well, what happens if we lose 50% of our donations this year? What's that going to do? Am I going to have enough cash, or what am I going to have to cut? You can play all that out on paper. Um, and so I think you can kind of wrestle some of those things to the ground a little bit instead of worrying about them. You can get them out on paper and say, okay, what if the worst thing in my mind comes to happen? What would I do? And you can just, and then there you go. And you can kind of like let that worry kind of ease out, um, or ease away. The other side of it is if you're not paying attention to it and you just kind of say yes and you just spend money and hey, let's just go hire that person. Let's not even worry about it. The money will take care of itself. Let's go hire. Well, sometimes cash creeps up and all of a sudden the cash balance creeps down, and then all of a sudden I've worked with so many, or several business owners in the past, not nonprofits on this, but business owners where they realize like I've got 2 months of cash left or a month of cash left. I need to figure this out.
Right.
Forecast can help with someone with that mindset too.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of future proofing this scenario because and
Yeah.
everything, I just did a session yesterday about planning, like 2.5 hours, and really there's no control, there's no certainty. It's just our best guess, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's part of it too, is I think there's some trust and some faith that you have built a community of support that will show up for you if needed.
Yep.
Right. And I think sometimes we forget when we're looking at those, numbers and saying where like you trust that because that's me, because I'm like trust that it's out there, that it'll show. Because sometimes people are like, oh, there's no money. And I said, but I bet you can point to so many times when the money came and when you thought it
Yep.
never would. Oh yeah. But we don't, but that there's facts and there's feelings, right? And the feeling is there's
Yes.
never enough money, but the fact is that there is. So when you
I
look at
had
this, you're saying, well, let's stop with the feelings, let's deal in the facts.
I had this is several years ago. I was in a session with a therapist, just doing some, kind of personal work on myself. And he said, "What if the worst case scenario happened? Like go to reality. Like, what would really the worst case scenario be? Don't go to the worst case scenario you think in your head. Like really, what would the worst case scenario be for whatever situation we were talking about? And it's usually when you start to think of it like that, it's usually not as bad as the what the feelings are maybe making you think that the worst case scenario is going to be. Because you're exactly right. Let's say that your donations drop. You've built a strong community of people who love your mission. If they believe in your mission, they're not going to let it like fall
Right,
by the wayside. They're going to step
right.
in. There's things you can do to fix that. So
Yeah. I think from a more of a fundraising perspective, that people can, like, as fundraisers, I think this is especially critical for you to understand like how you think and feel about money. I know that a lot of people come into nonprofit because they sort of resent money, and and think it's not a good thing, but then they have to go ask for it. And that they even resent having, like, needing the money in the first place. I think it can really thwart relationships subconsciously, not knowing
yeah,
it. And so I think, especially from a fundraising perspective, it is so critical for you to understand what your belief system is around money and how it was formed, and not so much how it was formed, but like really what it is, so that you can understand like where you might be pushing things away, right? Like you might be actually like pushing good things away,
yeah,
and subconsciously not really knowing, not really understanding, like, oh, that's so much money, I could never thank that person enough, or it feels unequal, right? Because we want it to be transactional. You give me this and I give you that, but fundraising isn't that same transactional. It's like, I'm giving you this because of, right, you said, because of the impact. And but people are like, oh, but I would owe them so much, like they feel indebted and it feels
yeah.
really uncomfortable.
But and it's hard because you're not always there in that moment when they get that email video of that story of that teenager or that animal shelter, whatever the cause is. You're not there when they open that email after a long day's work and they just sit there and maybe they cry or maybe they think, man, how do I invest more in this? You don't always get to see that side of it. But they wouldn't be given their hard-earned, dollars if they weren't getting something else out of it. That's usually
Right.
how I, that's usually how I approach it. So
Yeah,
think about what they're getting out of it too. They're getting something out of it.
they absolutely are. I mean, our highest, our greatest need, right, is contribution, giving back. That's our highest, and so when we give back, it makes us feel the best. So I always say, fundraising is a gift because you're giving people the opportunity to operate, to share their assets in service of their highest beliefs and ideals. And
Mhm.
it's not, this is a very specific language, but it's not because of you, it's through you. So
That's
not
right.
because of your animal shelter. They love animals, so through you, they are putting it through you, right? And it be in service of their highest ideals and beliefs. And so that's the beauty of fundraising, is what are we creating together, right? Your money, our, like, I'm not gonna go out and rescue dogs all day, but they
Right.
will.
Right.
And I'll be
Well,
happy to give some money to support that.
and I think it's cool. It's like imagine, I mean, not everyone can be a nonprofit, right? And not everybody can be have a ton of money and be super successful in business. And I think that's kind of the beauty of it is there's different people and who are just blessed with different things and or maybe who grew up with in certain families that, they were able to inherit a business or whatever the scenario is. But we all, we kind of want a little bit of so we want to kind of be well-rounded, all of us. So like if you're in that camp, you want, hey, I want some more impact. I want to feel more of that. I want to see more, how I can use my money to make it work for good. So yeah, it's never discount what they're getting out of it.
Yeah. So I'd love for you to share maybe a couple stories of some, maybe a little case study or some stories of clients that you worked with, and if you were able to really help them shift their thinking and operate more effectively.
Yeah, so one of the first ones comes to mind. It was an organization that when I met with them, they had really bad bookkeeping before, and so they weren't getting like their financial statements every month. It was just like it was a complete mess. They didn't have visibility. We sat down. I sat down with the leader, and basically we found out like you have like 8 weeks of money left, or else things are gonna have to shut down. We're gonna have to make like drastic changes. Um, so we sat down and put together a very like short term, week by week forecast to show like here's how we figure this out. Here's how we level the playing field. Here's how we get back to where this can be sustainable, so that you can keep driving your mission forward. And um, she had been operating in a very, very like scarcity mindset up to that point. Because it was just like constant looking at the bank account. And when she was doing that, she wasn't thinking about what do I need to make this a sustainable organization into the future. It was just short-term decision after short-term decision. And eventually that creates a cycle and it usually doesn't end well.
Yes.
Um, I've seen it. We've seen it with personal. I've seen it in business. It's the same. It doesn't really matter if it's a business or personal. Um, so after we did that and we got to the end of it, we saw, okay, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. There is, you're good. You can kind of breathe a little bit. I just kind of saw this sense of like, kind of saw her shoulders just like relax on the call.
Yeah.
And the next call, I noticed she started to think about, well, hey, what if I really want to keep this employee because I think they might leave in 6 months. Like she started to unlock this viewpoint of it wasn't just what am I going to do this week? It was what am I going to do in 6 months? And then eventually it was like, what am I going to do over the next year to make this a better organization? So that's one example that I've had pretty recently.
It's because I work with people on, shifting their mindset and the story they tell themselves to serve them better. Because whatever we tell ourselves is what becomes true, right?
Mm,
And if you tell yourself there's never enough, there's never enough. And if you tell yourself there's enough, there's enough. Um, and I think it's a combination of mindset and strategy, right? It's a combination of really doing that inner work and then also the really good like forecasting and the strategies that you have in place. They have to work together.
yeah.
And if somebody's coming in and trying to help you with your finances and not honoring or acknowledging how you think and feel about money, I don't think they're going to serve you very well. That's just my experience because they're
So
not going to be, because it's such a trigger, and it's so personal and our relationship is so conflicted that if you're not really examining everyone's opinion. And I also think that we tend to get board members from corporate spaces that have a very like conservative approach to money, and they're not always the ones who are saying, yes, let's invest in this big vision. Yes, they're saying, whoa. You know what I'm saying? They're saying, like, I don't know if we can do this. And it keeps the dream small and it keeps us not really making the impact that we want. That's my that we get bound by, okay, instead of creating the budget of instead of like creating the forecasting for what we really want to have happen, we create what we think we can do. You see,
correct.
because we don't know where the instead of and I know like a lot of other I'm like there's a woman, Sherry Quam Taylor, who really helps nonprofits. I don't know if you know who her she's wonderful.
I
She's
do.
been on my podcast before. Really helps nonprofits unlock that belief system right? And that you can raise a lot of money. And I think that that's so important because, like I said, whatever story you tell yourself, that's what'll happen. Mm.
Yeah, I think it's spot on. And it even your personal financial situation if and your team's personal financial situation can kind of play into this too. I mean, I know there's been a big push, especially in recent years, of just kind of paying, nonprofit salaries have almost always been kept well below kind of average corporate salaries for, and I know there's been a push to bring those up in recent
Yeah.
years, and there's been a lot more voices speaking
A
into
lot. I
that.
think I mean, I've been in the industry for a long time and it's changed so much. And, like, I think many years ago, we worked with the Big Brothers, Big Sisters here in Eastern Missouri and St. Louis, and they moved into this new space and, like this historical kind of building. And people would walk in, they say, huh, this is really nice. And the director at the time would say, yes, because our kids and our staff deserve the best.
Mhm.
Right? And there was no apology but people would say, "How?" And then I was doing this workshop in Chicago, the same one I mentioned before, and it was this YMCA, which was like this beautiful conference space, very well done. And this one's like, well, this is a little nice for a nonprofit. And it was so interesting because the workshop was on money mindset. And I didn't say
Interesting.
anything right then, but I like, because you'll hear, because people are going to tell you what
Right.
they think and feel. If you listen. And it turns out, like, I said, I heard what you said. I'm really interested. And she was like, I keep getting jobs at nonprofits that resent money and I
Mm.
don't make any money. And I'm like, and I look at this, I'm like, oh, and I think, but this is like they raise the money, like because we look at you can't win. If you look
Right.
dingy, people are like, where's your money going? If you look nice, what are you spending your money on? It's okay to have a nice space. It's okay to have people paid well. It's because that's your infrastructure. That's the most
Correct.
valuable assets we have are their folks.
Yep.
But she said she said in that moment you can always see the light bulb, right?
Yep.
Like boom. And she was like, "Oh my God, I work for these people and I'm attached to the scarcity mindset." And when
Yeah.
I see it, when I see people in this organization who obviously did not have that mindset, she was like, you know,
Yeah.
and so she really could be able to like, okay, because when the unconscious becomes conscious, then we can make change. But until then, we're just bound by habits and patterns that we don't recognize.
Yep. And
And
that's where,
that's what we both do, right? We're both
yeah.
doing the same thing. We're just doing it in different avenues. That's why I wanted to have this conversation with you because it's
Yeah.
the same work. It's just
Yep.
in different parts of running a business, which
Yep.
is taking what's unconscious and making it conscious so you can actually make a change.
Yep. And you can't do it until you start digging into your own past and your own kind of experience and relationship with it, with money. Um, one thing that as you were talking, it came to mind is it's funny. Sometimes the loudest donors are often not the best. In fact, most of the time they are.
They
Maybe I'll
aren't.
get in trouble by saying that, but I have found most of the time that the people you want to partner with long term, especially when it comes to like bigger donors, they're the ones that you say, hey, we're gonna pay our staff, we're going to increase, them 10 to 15% because they're just under market right now. And they say, perfect. I think that's a great way to keep great staff. They're not the ones that say, are you sure you want to do that? You are a nonprofit. It's the first one. And there are, I think, and maybe this is me being naive. I'm not a fundraiser, so maybe the fundraisers can push back on me a little bit. I think there's more of those out there when you give them a good explanation than there are of the loud folks.
Yes.
Um,
Well, I think that it's about the trust. Like you're
yeah.
going to trust us to use these resources to the best of our ability. And if you're not, every relationship is rooted in trust, and they're loud because they don't have the trust.
That's a
Um,
great point.
so I don't know if you've ever read these books. Have you ever read The Soul of Money? Have you heard of that book, The Soul of
Mm-mm.
Money? Okay,
No.
there's two books. Okay. So The
I'm gonna
Soul of
write these
Money.
down though.
Yeah, write it down. Everybody write it down. It's called The Soul of Money. It's not a book about fundraising. It's a book about our relationship to money, but it was written by this woman who was a brilliant fundraiser. And I don't want to get too much into it because I'll talk forever about it, but you can do your own work. But it's Lynn Twist. It's called The Soul of Money. And that book really changed that was one of the biggest things. And it's just really about like money occupies the power we give it, right? And
Hmm.
we have given too much power and control over to money. And but she talks about like everyone having assets, and even and story after story about people who live in with nothing, and how they created something out of nothing because they had assets, and how important it is to have this idea of like of sufficiency, which is I have enough and everyone has enough. And it's a really great. Okay,
Hmm.
the other book, it's this one is wild though, okay? So, Stephen, you might want to read this and then you can debrief with me. It's called Busting Loose from the Money Game. Okay, and it's insane. I'm going to tell you because he makes this case for how where this is all the matrix and this is all an illusion and this is just a game that we've learned to play, and at any point in time we can actually change the game and play a different game. And it is kind of blows the lid off our how we think and feel about debt wrong like and all of because this is just a game, and you can play a different game. And I'm going to tell you, this book is so crazy. I was listening to it driving, and another person, I was going on this retreat, another person was listening to it on the plane, and we got together, we're like, oh my god, we had to have a book club to get ourselves through this one. But I'm telling you that and you can take it or leave it. I can't who, you can be like, oh, this is ridiculous. Robert Scheinfeld is the guy.
Okay.
Like, but it's always worth just an exploration because I think reading these things can help you then understand, okay, here's what I want for myself. Here's what I believe, and it can be whatever you want. And I think that's part of this is just understanding like what my mindset, like what the mindset I was carrying, and then what I want it to be now. And I made a one of my things for this year is one of the things I want to let go of is worrying about money because it never helps. It doesn't
Never.
change anything.
Yep.
It only fills your brain. And because my husband and I had this story, like he like, oh, neither one of us are good with money. And I would say, okay, that's a lie because um like sometimes I'll blow it. Sometimes I save it, but like it's all the things and it's all okay. But I said that's just a story you're telling yourself
Mhm.
so you can absolve yourself from that. Because you can be he's a molecular biologist and a plant scientist. He can absolutely be good at whatever he chooses to be good
100%.
at.
Yes. I always say
That's
I went
willful ignorance.
I always say I went into finance because it's the math is easier than engineering. It's addition and multiplication, and it's not like all these, crazy math. So it's not rocket science by any means,
Yes. So
but it's
I
discipline. It takes
It is.
discipline.
It does. And also desire trumps discipline because discipline is like I
Yes,
have to do it
that's
because I
really
need to
good.
do it. But if I desire, because the story you opened with your brag was really about your desire, right?
That's
Like
right.
that was a story for me, what I interpret like that I set out to do it and I did it, and because I wanted to, because it was important to me. And I think that's why, it does take, there is a role for discipline and desire, all of
Yeah.
that. And I would really encourage people who are listening to this to start thinking about how they talk about money, and listening, paying attention to those stories and doing like maybe picking up one of these books and just doing their own personal money inventory, because it does come through in everything that you do and you have. And even like I said, these little decisions you're making, or the story I told about the board president and the ED and their conflict, and understanding like why something feels so difficult or wrong to you when it doesn't to somebody else. I think
Mhm.
it's just so important.
One thing I wanted to mention is once someone digs into this area and kind of understands more about themselves, I think looking around, who's in your kind of personal board, who's in your personal sphere of advisors, or who can you go to talk to about whatever issue you're working on with your organization. Having someone who has the opposite viewpoint or the opposite kind of relationship with money will be a net benefit to your organization,
Yeah.
because it's just the more perspectives you have that kind of round out the full circle, the better your organization is going to be.
Yeah,
So,
I love that. All right, we're gonna wrap it up, and this is always my last question. And my last question is, I'm in St. Louis. You're outside of Atlanta, but if we
mhm.
ever wind up in a karaoke bar together, what is your go-to song and why?
Oh my gosh, this is such a good one. I have so many.
Do you have a list on your phone? Because I do.
I don't, but I love that. Oh my gosh. I have so many. I would say I'm gonna go with two. These are so cliche and so typical, but if I had a little bit more time to dig through, I'd probably come
No,
with a
no
better answer.
excuses. Just
Yeah, I know.
stand firmly behind your
I'm
choices.
gonna go. I like to get the crowd going. So I wanna get the crowd. I want crowd interaction. So I'm gonna either say "Living on a Prayer"
All
or
right.
"Sweet Caroline," like
Okay,
something
there
that
you go.
gets the crowd like
Right. And
going.
we're all singing. We're all in it with you together.
Yes, yeah, like
Carolina. And then everybody's going, ba, ba, ba.
yeah,
Yep.
exactly. Yeah.
I
So
just like it
I want to
when,
put on a show.
and I love living on a prayer too. That's a classic.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah. I mean that those are both winners. All right, Stephen, thank you so much for being here. And how can people get in touch with you if they're interested in learning more about what you do or taking advantage of your CEO, fractional CEO services or
Yeah, so you
CFO,
can
sorry.
no, you're good. You're good. You can look me up on LinkedIn. It's Steven with a PH Newland on LinkedIn, or I've got some free goodies on my website, including some nonprofit discounts and a few other things. It's
Yay.
MoneyPath. Yeah, it's moneypathfpa.com. So
Okay.
check it out.
And those the links are in the show notes. We have the links in the show notes. So if you don't have to write this down or panic. It's all in there.
Yes.
But go get the free stuff that he's got. Always get the goodies and see because you never know what you're going to learn and where it's going to take you.
Yep.
Stephen, thanks so much for being with me today. It was great to talk to you. I love what you're doing. I think this is such an important topic, and I hope we can, just talk about it a lot more and help a lot more people with, with their money mindset and their ability to like run their organizations.
Absolutely. And then maybe the last parting thing I'll say is a financially sustainable organization is one that starts with the leader and understanding their relationship with money and even, the leadership. But then a financially sustainable organization is one that can last a long time and can serve and help a lot of people or a lot of things in this world. So that's why it's so important.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.